G'day, Lucas here again from Tribu. Thank you very much for joining us on another LinkedIn and Facebook Live. And I've got the amazing Patrick with us. G'day, Patrick. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Lucas. Thank you for having me.
The pretty cool thing is, I guess, about this connected world that we now live in is Patrick and I have actually not met before in real life or even in person or online. This is our first get together. So the cool thing about doing these, I guess, natural conversations of going from, I was off the back of a previous LinkedIn Live I did with an awesome guy in the MSP space. Jamie, Patrick jumped on board, started watching it, commented. We started having some conversations around, I guess, MSPs and engineers and technicians and people in general and the whole sales process. And as you can tell, Patrick's got some, a few years of experience, let's just say that, under his belt in the service provider world. And obviously the sales world. So this is going to be an awesome conversation. Thanks for jumping on board, Patrick.
You're welcome, Lucas. As I said, I'm glad to be here. I hope I can be of value.
I dare say you can. So let's just, I guess, start with give us a bit of background. I know, let's try and keep it under 3 minutes or so, but let's get a bit of a background on yourself. I guess your experience and what brings you to this conversation today.
Okay. Well, as a kid, I always wanted to be a salesperson. So I suppose that's a bit unusual. No one ever thinks of being a salesperson, right? So I didn't want to be a fireman or anything else because my dad was a salesperson. And I started off selling mining construction, heavy equipment, and got interested in IT as a regional manager of a company, sort of using computers as a tool. So interested, in fact, that I did a career broad jump and then went into IT. And worked for a variety of companies, for example, Oracle Systems and other organizations, got involved in a few turnarounds. And in the process, I kind of created my own sales teams. I started off selling and I was very successful, frankly, at doing that. And then as I became a sales manager, regional manager, and managing director of companies, I always focused on coaching and training my own sales teams. And then people started to approach me and say, look, can you run a workshop for my sales teams? And I said, well, that's not really what I do. And they said, oh, come on, just a half a day or something. Anyway, that sort of demand got to the stage where I decided to sort of, formalize or codify my methods into a sales training program, which is what I'm sort of focused on now.
I'm curious to dig into that a bit deeper. So it sounds like your I guess, natural progression, right, of being in the sales world, of selling heavy machinery to then being in tech sales and working for Oracle, obviously one of the largest enterprise tech enterprise companies in the world. Was it a natural progression that you got asked to start managing a team, leading a team, training a team from being in that space? Or was that something that actually you naturally fell into, that you put your hand up and said, I really want to do? I'm keen to dig into that side of it.
Well, I suppose I was fairly ambitious in the mining construction field, selling Caterpillar equipment. I was fortunate to get into a company that spent a lot of time and effort coaching and training people to be leaders. And I had some really good mentors, which embedded in me this sense of the real value of having a mentor and getting coaching and training early in the piece. And in fact, with the company I work with, Hastings Deering here in Queensland, a Caterpillar dealer, it became a bit of a joke that I was probably the most highly trained non-manager in the place. When I eventually got to the stage of getting a leadership role, I felt really, really well prepared. And I didn't realize how unique that potentially was, because that's not my experience since then, in terms of people tend to have to learn about sales management leadership on the job. They tend not to get that coaching so that they can more easily transition into those types of roles.
I suppose it's not like sales guys put their hand up and go, I want to go to university and study sales, or I want to go do all these courses or whatever. Like it's one of those skills that's learned on the job and understanding, which I guess is what the topic of conversation is today, that we want to have this conversation. So rather than meeting up for a coffee, we decided to jump on a LinkedIn Live. Why not? It's the new world we're living in. If we're talking about the value that you add, and I'm going to put this in the context of a sales process, right? Because essentially what I've understood over the last 10 plus years in sales is it's a process that you can methodologically follow to then convert that deal. You mentioned to me before that like it's you got like the hard sellers are just selling a product or a service, but at the end of the day, people want to buy from people. And I know we want to touch on two topics right now, which is the sales process topic, or let's dive into the sales topic, which I guess a lot of the viewers will want to dive into as well. But on the other end is the why people buy products and services from people, and then how does that why then filter down to all the team members that are going to be using that product or service? Because essentially, if I sell my service or a product to the director of a company, that's one person. But you want the entire company using that product or service, right?
Yes.
So maybe let's start with the topic around, I guess, the sales process, the value, what you've understood and experienced in your world the last X amount of years, and how you've come to doing what you're doing now.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. You sort of asked the question in two parts there, taking sort of the seller perspective on the one hand and the buyers on the other. And I guess one of the first things there is they're fundamentally mismatched. I mean, traditional sales process are not well matched to buyers' needs. And I guess the expression I like to use is the salesperson's role is to create an environment in which people buy. So it's not so much, and so therefore it's not a thing that you do to buyers, it's something you do with them. And rather than telling, it's more about asking, and it's empowering them so they're able to make a good decision. I heard a really good definition fairly recently. It was a quote, and it came from Anthony Iannarino. It wasn't his. He didn't know. He couldn't attribute it either. And so I'm going to. It's not my quote, but I think it's really good. I think that what buyers want is a salesperson they can trust to help them make decisions they don't trust themselves to make. And that really, to me,
that's powerful. I love that.
It's great, isn't it?
Can you repeat that for us again?
Okay, so buyers want people to help them make decisions they don't trust themselves to make.
That's it.
That means so trust is the essence, right? Now, ironically, salespeople start off by selling and promoting, but ironically, that's the worst thing you can do, because self-interest is the one thing that undermines trust. So almost from the get-go, the traditional sales model undermines trust. David Maister, who coined the expression trusted advisor, which is a fairly common expression, came up with the idea of the trust equation. And that's like a typical equation. On the top line is credibility, reliability, and intimacy. Credibility, tell the truth. Reliability, do what you say you're going to do. Intimacy, which is transparency, be open. That grows trust. That makes sense, doesn't it? Which is sort of most people intuitively do. The one thing at the bottom, though, that undermines trust is self-interest, talking about yourself. So you talk about your product, self-interest. Talk about yourself, self-interest. The average needs exploration to find out what you might be able to sell, self-interest. So the whole dialogue, if you like, is orientated to almost lose trust from the get-go. And so that's the challenge for salespeople, is to grow trust. And to do that means having the buyer lead the conversation. So it's all about them, not about you.
I think this would be relevant, and correct me if I'm wrong here, terminology I've heard many years ago was the best salespeople in the world are the people who don't sell at all.
Yes.
Is that typically what you're talking about right now?
Unfortunately, sales got this connotation, but you're right.
Yeah.
Yes. I've got a working title for a book, which is "Sell More by Selling Less."
That's cool. Love it. Can you give us a bit of a high level snippet of what that means now? Or you don't want to give it away?
Yeah. It is. It's about creating that environment in which people will buy. Now, the irony of this is that traditional salespeople, when you describe this process, think, "Oh, that's going to take a long time," like growing trust. I've got to sell something meantime. How can I do that? Well, the reason it takes a long time to grow trust is because the whole sales dialogue undermines it, ironically. If you start from the get-go, you can grow trust with someone within the first call, just by not talking about yourself, just by coming across as honest, genuine, genuinely caring, genuinely interested. Because there's a thing called the trust default theory, right? We as humans default to trust. We prefer to trust. That's how we managed to evolve, because we had to create communities, right? And that's how we survived as a species. That is, but we're very good pattern matchers. We're very good at seeking out risk. And to our amygdala, our lizard brain, a salesperson is analogous to a saber-toothed tiger. As soon as you rock up, the amygdala fires off, the lizard brain says, this person's not to be trusted. You're damned before you open your mouth.
It was like when the first phone call is made, and they're like, I know you're trying to sell me something, so don't try and sell me something at all.
Yeah, I'm
Actually, how do you
Patrick
get past that? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm Patrick Bacousas. I'm from it. Oh, you're going to sell me something.
Yeah.
Well, exactly from the get-go, and so what we've got to do then is, the most useful attribute for salespeople, well, apart from curiosity, the ability to ask questions, is, if I was to, what is good preparation ground for a salesperson? Psychology. Learn about people's behavior, learn a bit of neuroscience too, and how our brains work. And all of a sudden, you come to realize why traditional sales methods don't work. I mean, people don't like to be persuaded. Anyone's got teenage kids, tell them what to do. How does that go? Not at all, right? They have to.
Are you trying to tell me cold calling doesn't work?
No, I think cold calling does work. It does work, provided you do it the right. You're not a dick about it, right?
Yeah.
And that's hard. And it takes practice. And that's the other thing that salespeople don't do enough of is practicing. They're all live performance. And so we tend to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. Buyers don't mark your card. They just don't buy. They don't say to you, well, actually, Lucas, why don't you try asking me this question? Why don't you try out? You don't get that kind of feedback that you need to become better as a salesperson.
I'm gonna tilt the conversation, and you don't have to go in this direction if you want it, but I'm curious myself. I'm gonna be selfish right now. We talk about the massive word that you use is trust in the sales conversation, right? And the reason salespeople don't like being calling salespeople is because obviously the trust is gone in the car sales or the real estate sales industries. Like, it completely disappeared. Maybe different in this market because the market's just crazy right now. But like, if that trust is gone, how do you get rid of that? I guess analogy that sits around the car sales and the real estate sales industry that has been there forever, in my opinion.
Yeah. So you've heard about the power of first impressions and how that's created within sort of milliseconds. And so as soon as you rock up, even if you've had an appointment, the person is waiting for a salesperson. So you have to disabuse them of that to begin with your opening line. And so I use a technique that I call IWU. It's not a technique I invented. It was developed by a couple of colleagues of mine, Keith Dugdale and David Lambert. And from the get-go, your first words out of your mouth are an outcome that you hope the buyer is going to get, so that they know that, this is, thank you for spending time with me. What I hope you're going to get out of this session is you'll understand whether or not I might be of value to you. What do you think of that? Get that sort of confirmation, or whatever it was that set the meeting up. I won't go through the process here.
Yeah.
And so be thoughtful about that. Whereas instead, most people start off with the icebreaker, oh, g'day, how you going? You're the third salesperson today that's asked them that. It's like people calling in at a hotline. One of the things my pet hates in a hotline, g'day, so-and-so, how are you going? And I'm thinking, I listened to 5 people on this bloody chat line ask that same question. Haven't you heard the answer yet? That's what we do, though. And we just irritate people. So don't do that,
So just get straight to the punchline. The reason I'm calling is to add value to your business, and this is the outcome I'm trying to achieve. Is that of interest to you? Yes or no?
Well, no, you can't say I'm interested in adding value, because I don't know if I can. And just on that, here's something else. You can't add value. You can't create value. You can't propose value, because value is received. Value isn't a thing that we give. I mean, we can give products and we can give services. Whether or not they're of value is for the buyer to judge. And so we need to shift this sort of paradigm that salespeople have, that they're in a position to create value. They can't do that. I mean, the buyer will tell you the value is what the buyer is left with when the salesperson's gone. Yeah. So, and then if you get that, then what that makes you do is ask the questions to understand from the buyer, what is it that you value? So if they turn around and say, well, what value are you to me? You can say, well, frankly, I don't know. I may not be.
Yeah. You put them on the back foot, because then they'll automatically think that you're in a sales position, but actually, you got to switch it around back onto them, and they have to be in control, which everyone, and you might deny this, but you love being in control in every conversation. It's a natural human thing to do, right?
It is.
So you've been in product sales, i.e. selling hardware, excavators. You've been in service sales, and you've also been in SaaS online product
Yes.
sales, as I understand it.
Yes.
I'm keen to understand the differences, if there is any, when it comes to selling or building a sales process or converting leads. Let's call it from cold calling all the way through warm leads, etc. Industries, sectors. It's at the end of the day, it's people buying from people, right?
Yeah.
Keen to get your thoughts around that.
Well, there you've got it, Lucas. There's absolutely no difference. I'm here to tell you that, I've sold software, hardware. I've sold big spreads of earth-moving construction equipment for an entire project, tens of millions of dollars worth of equipment, $60 million software implementation projects. It's exactly the same as selling advertising or anything else that I've been involved with, an insert in a magazine where I've also had experience doing that. Because you're absolutely right. It's not about products. Selling is about people.
The product or service you're delivering is solving a problem that they need solved.
Yeah. I'll tell you a very quick story. As I said, I was in the construction machinery game, running a company, and I was an early adopter of IT. That was in the days of sort of batch computers. That ages me. And I just got really fascinated in this thing as a tool. And I basically invented what would now be called a CRM, like a customer information system. And I was just fascinated by the technology, got to learn a bit more. And I decided I'd like to get into IT, because I'd sort of basically topped out in the industry I was in. So, and I had some friends that were working in IT. And so I went on a door knock around Brisbane, and no company was interested in talking to me. You're just not the right background, except one. And they sent me off to Sydney for an interview. And I had the interview, and the sales director said, okay, well, we'll give you a try. And he sent me through to HR to sort of do the paperwork. And the HR director said, well, look, I wish you well, Pat, but I've got to tell you, I don't think you're going to succeed. And I said, well, why is that? He said, well, you don't fit our profile. We've done a lot of study on this. And I said, well, what's the profile? He said, well, you have a computer science degree. You'd worked a couple of years in pre-sales support, and then you would have got out in the street. I said, okay. And I said, how many ex-tractor salesmen did you have in your sample? And he said, well, none. And I said, well, how do you know then? Anyway, I went out on the road. I didn't have a patch. They weren't going to give me one. I had no customers. I had nothing, but I made quota in my first year. And that was because I could hold conversations with business people. I had some basic business sense, obviously, but I didn't know about IT. And I was totally non-threatening, where oftentimes IT people come across as, one of the things I advocate for salespeople is don't be an expert, because you end up like two bulls in the paddock, in an Australian expression. Just be a human being and understand the other person. What is it they want to achieve, and become an agent that helps them achieve that.
Yeah, I get this conversation quite common, because obviously we've transitioned from a service-based business selling IT support and consulting to obviously building an AI platform, which is a bit of a scary situation for a lot of people to understand, to IT companies, right? So it's that switch from a service to a product. So I'm having these conversations every day with MSPs and IT support providers. They go, well, they want to know the story of how I grew the last company and was able to exit it, and what does that look like, and how do you scale as sales? Because most tech guys are not sales, right? The most directors of these IT companies are they haven't even hired a salespeople, and if the bigger ones do, they have a full sales team, right? They say, well, how do you get sales? I'm like, just have conversations with business owners. What'd you sell them? I didn't sell them anything. I just had a conversation with them. Well, how'd you win the business? I had a conversation with them. It's not like I'm not selling. Like, okay, there's a need of something that you're selling, of course. Like, there's a need that they need systems, or they need better processes, or a better way of working, or there's a need of something. But that's not how you build a relationship. You're not there to try and knock on a door and trying to sell something in 2 seconds. Different story with solar. Maybe you're going out and literally knocking on doors. But you know what I mean? It's you're just building that relationship with a business owner and doing that. What I've struggled with the last couple of years of switching my mindset from having that one-on-one business owner conversation to then building a product and then launching a online product, and then in what happens in our world is our team's like, oh, we shouldn't have to ever have salespeople. Companies should just go and find us, click a button, buy the product, and then we're good to go. You're shaking your head, so I know where this conversation is going to go. Why not? Tell me, Patrick. Why can't I do that? Why can't I just build a product and then people just buy it and then we're happy days?
Yeah, because you're dealing with a human being, right? And I mean, here's a good example that your typical client, for example, how often do they buy the type of thing that you're selling? Not very often, right? If they're looking for an MSP, maybe every 3 years or so, they go out and look for an MSP. You as an MSP, though, how often are you dealing with clients buying it? So you're far more aware of what's involved in buying your service than they are. I mean, you would know the pitfalls, you would know the questions. So here's the thing, there's a really good book I read fairly recently by, I guess, Warren Burger's a guy's name, called A More Beautiful Question. And today, there's so much information. I mean, you can find out whatever you want to find out. We've got the internet, we've got Google, all of this. The problem isn't answers. The challenge today is questions, knowing what questions to ask. So if I want to get myself an MSP, how do I go about that? How do I know what questions I should even ask? How do I know to explore? And that's where you can be of immense value to help them buy. Now, a lot of sellers would start to think, oh, geez, I can't do that because, I mean, what if he goes and buys from someone else? And here's the thing. Well, they won't. They'll buy from you because they will trust you because you are helping them to make the decision. The very fact you help facilitate it, that's the benefit of giving. People will value that and they'll say, gee, Lucas is, I've learned so many things I ought to know. Clearly, Lucas knows the answer to these things because he knows the questions. Whatever Lucas thinks I need, that's what I'm going to buy. I've got a number of people in my program now who are signing up deals without quoting a price. The buyer, in fact, I've got a webinar called the No Price Sale. I teach a 5-stage sales process. The price and your product is step 5 in a six-step process. It's right at the very end. We don't talk about product at all. And if you don't talk about product, you will grow trust. The minute you talk about a product, and particularly the minute you have a price on the table, then by definition, you're defending it. You cannot have a price on the table without every conversation is a sense defending it, is self-interest, undermining trust.
Interesting. And so I'm keen to dig into that because obviously people buy from people, and that's obviously it's easier to win. And I, from a sales perspective, it's easier for me to have a meeting with a MSP and then sell my product to an MSP, sell my product sell the solution that will save them a lot of time. But scaling, that's a different question, right? Because then you're building an entire, so there's 2 ways to go about this. You're building an entire sales team in every country in the world that are doing doing the exact same thing versus what our team and a lot of thousands of tech startups would think, well, I can just build a product, and once I build it, they'll come and they'll just buy it and they'll click a button and we're good to go. We don't need a sales team. How do you shift that mentality? Or firstly, why can't you just do an off-the-shelf product? Why do you have to have a sales team? And we're talking B2B sales here. We're not.
Yeah, I understand that. Well, because value is in the eye of the beholder. If you're not going to engage with the buyer, then you're going to assume what the buyer values. How do you know? How do you know that without having the conversation, engaging with the buyer to learn what they value? So, it works online where it is self-evident, what they want to buy, but it's a risk. So to give you an example, when I bought a TV, I went online, I did all of my research, figured out the TV I wanted. I walked into a retailer and, g'day, how can I help you? I'd like to buy a TV. Oh, yeah, what TV are you looking up? Told him. His question was, what price have you been quoted? And I said, well, you tell me your price. So he goes away, consults the computer. You're familiar with this. He comes back and says, oh, I can do that for X dollars. And I said, no, you're going to need to be this. He said, oh, no, I can't do that. I said, no. Okay, thanks. As it happened, and this is in Brisbane, I won't mention the names of the stores. I walked down a few and I went into another specialist audiovisual retailer. The guy walked up, introduced himself. I said, how can I help you? He said, I want a TV. Why do you want a TV? And I said, well, to watch stuff. It's getting to my why, right? I said, yeah, but what types of things do you like to watch? I said, oh, sports, current affairs, stuff like. What type of sports do you like? And I said, oh, football. He said, fast-moving sports? Yeah. So he's getting a sense of screen refresh and what I'd be looking for there. How big a room have you got? How many people are likely to sit around the TV? Ask me all of these questions, right? And I think, well, no one's asked this stuff before. Anyway, long story short, he came and he said, well, this is probably the type of TV that would suit you. And I bought it. Wasn't what I was originally looking at. I didn't even go next door to check the price. I just bought it from him. The difference was, Lucas, he helped me buy my TV. He didn't sell me his TV.
Yeah. That
And I even bought the extended warranty, and I never, ever do that. Never do that.
Yeah. And switching the conversation of what product do you want me to sell you versus what outcome do you want from watching a TV?
Absolutely.
That's literally the conversation. Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. Love it.
Absolutely.
And no doubt in your world, you've got 20 million of these stories that you could easily,
So
and
many.
it's relatable, right? And that only happened in the last couple of weeks, no doubt, that you went into this,
Well, no, it wasn't. A few years ago. And I'll just tell you the postscript to that. A few years later, I needed a camera. And I had about half an hour to spare. And I was driving through the valley in Brisbane, and I thought, I might just pop in here. And I don't want to buy a camera today, but I might just find out a bit. As it happens, there was the same brand of store. I walked in and I said, I'm looking for a camera. And the guy said, why do you want a camera? Long story short, I walked out with a camera, and I definitely was not going to buy one that day. And he was a guy who wasn't involved in cameras. He said, look, I don't handle cameras. I know nothing about cameras. But anyway, let me know what you want. Let me know. And he was perfectly confident in handling the inquiry, right? He could still have a conversation with me about what I wanted a camera for, because it had nothing to do with cameras. It had to do with me. Yeah. Then when the camera specialist came across, he was able to say, look, Patrick's looking for something, he wants to take this kind of photo. He didn't say what type of camera I wanted. He said he wants to take this sort of photo. He wants to use it for this. He was totally in my world.
He built that connection and that relationship with you immediately.
Absolutely.
And you end up walking out he got a sale and you walked out with a camera when you both weren't even planning on doing that in the first place. So yeah, it's coming from a different direction. Love it.
That's why you grow trust so quickly, because you don't talk about your product. Let me tell you, if you're a salesperson and then someone turns around to you and says, oh, look, well, tell me about yourself. What can you do? And you say, well, I'm not terribly sure yet. I just need to understand you a bit more. You will grow trust very, very quickly. And then you'll find that your whole dynamic will change in terms of they will open up to you. You will learn more. They feel safe being vulnerable. They feel safe saying, look, I don't know what the hell I'm doing here. They'll never tell the traditional salesman that, because they think they'd never give you a break, because they think, oh, you'd be down my throat trying to sell me something.
I think I accidentally, listening to everything you're saying today, I think I accidentally got into sales just because I'm such a curious person. And every meeting I've ever had with any person that I've met in the world, I always ask, why do they do that? What they do? What drives them? What are they trying to achieve? Not because I'm trying to sell them anything, because I actually care. I actually want to know. I'm actually curious. Is it just a mask that they're putting on? They're like a 9-to-5 work mask, or is it actually, are they being their authentic self? So I think I've accidentally fell into sales only because I just love meeting people and cultures and seeing what drives people. So that's curious that everything you're talking about completely relates to that topic. So cool. I'd love to switch this conversation now into the post-sale, let's call it transition. You could call it like the post-merger conversation. You haven't sold your product or service to someone, but they've bought it from you because you built that trust. They've now got your product or service. Typically, and this is in most B2B sales, the director or the person you're selling to probably won't even use your product theoretically. It'll be the team and their staff and everything else in the organization, and they're the ones that are going to get value from that product or service that you've sold to. Not just in our business and what we've been doing for the last 10 plus years and in other companies, but also in every other organization that I've associated myself with over the years. It's like that transition of, well, once we have them as a customer, how do we keep them as a customer? Can we upsell them or cross-sell them, or can we make more money from that particular customer? It's always a topic of conversation, right? In your world, and maybe you don't have experience here, but I'm going to assume you do. In your world, you don't go, okay, I've done my BDM job. I've now sold what I need to sell to that company. I'm moving on to the next deal. And then if they'll lose them, well, too bad. It's not my fault, because that's typically what happens from a sales team to an account management team, right? Hey, it wasn't me. It was, you can't manage them properly after the fact. I'm just keen to dive into that conversation and how you've handled that over the years.
Yeah. Well, I guess there's a couple of variations. The traditional model with the hunters, the people go out and win the sales, and then there's the farmers, so-called, because the account managers. And my personal view on that's an unfortunate split. I'm personally not in favor of that. However, that said, there are attributes that hunters have that equip them to do that. And the account manager type is a different type of model. However, you should have a blended model where the guy that won the sale still stays engaged, if for no other reason than to ensure that the buyer is still getting value and that you're still delivering on the promise that you made. So they can have the conversation in terms of saying, look, I'm just curious, Lucas, are you comfortable with the value you're getting from us? And because he has that initial relationship, Lucas will feel safe in saying, well, actually, no, my account manager's this or that or whatever else. And of course, this guy's role is not then to rubbish his own people. It's to say, well, that's useful. How could we be doing it better for you? And then to work collaboratively with the team. So that's my personal view on that. I've had a number of examples where, and I guess the account manager's role is it's like a marriage, right? You've got to keep working on it. You've got to keep winning the sale. You've got to keep winning the customer. And going for sort of years and okay, we got this for 3 years, we're all done and dusted, and then there's the frenzied activity in the last 6 months where that shouldn't be happening. You should know all the way through that we're going to keep this client, in much the same way that you should know you're going to win a sale from the moment you have that first meeting with a prospect. There you go. You should know that you've engaged with this person in a way that says, I got this. The way that I'm relating to this person, the way that I'm sort of going trust and he's opening up, there's a lot of territory we have to cover, but I'm confident that I can win this. And that's what distinguishes the real pros in selling. They know they won the sale from the beginning, not the end.
Because once again, it's a sales process, right? And if they've got the checklist together, they know that if they get them past that and mentally gut feeling, whatever it might be, vibe, then they know that all they're doing is following the checklist the rest of the way through. Yeah. As long as they do that and they don't stuff that up, then they're pretty confident. Yeah, I've seen that happen many times.
It's where the traditional model collapses is, we have a traditional sales cycle, which is, you have the first call, then you go and see them, and then maybe you do the demo, then maybe you do the quote, and then maybe you go into negotiation. You've got these gates, and they're probably in your CRM as stages, right? Your funnel. You're treating buyers like sheep. You're sort of putting them through these gates. That's not the buyer's view of the world. So what you really need to map is where the buyer's head's at and the buyer's journey. And that's more complicated because it's less obvious. How do you know the buyer trusts you? But that's the skill you need to gain. And that's where you need to think differently, and where sales managers, for example, need to have different stages. Because there's this sense of, well, because I've got them to a demo, because I've got them to here, then I've got such and such a chance of winning the sale. Garbage. No, you haven't. Whether you're going to win the sale is a function of where the buyer's head's at. Okay, and that's what you need to be in tune with.
This is exactly the same with our product, right? Obviously, we've been building this for 2.5 years. We've only just launched, so it's very, very early days with our AI. But the conversation I've had the last couple of weeks is exactly what you're talking about. We get the buy-in initially from the director or the owner of the MSP or IT company, and then they're great, love it. Let me get the service delivery manager involved. Then you get the service delivery manager involved. Then they go, yep, love it. Let me get the team involved. Then you got to get the team involved, and you got those buying stages to get, I guess, acceptance from the entire group rather than just acceptance from one person. And our team have already said, "Oh my God, this is frustrating. Why are we back into B2B sales? We're just building a product." It's because
that's a complex. That's a typical complex sale, right? Multiple decision makers. That's welcome to complex sales. That's what it is. Yeah.
No way around that. Because at the end of the day, it's back to what you said originally. It's trust. You got to be trusting the product, the service, the team, the people who are delivering it. You got to build that trust around the entire thing, right? And it's vice versa. Trust on both sides, not from just our side and their side, but also from their internal team as well, right? They want to know that their entire team have made the right decision, not just one person. And I dare say, if you back in your Oracle enterprise sales days, it'd be the same thing. You're not selling a $2 widget. You're selling a $1 million, $10 million project.
Yeah, but I mean, we often say, "Oh, look, I've got Telstra as a customer, or I've got so and so as a customer." But actually, what you got was half a dozen people that were on the decision team. They were the people that made the decision, right? And I think the thing for salespeople is to understand which people they need on the decision-making team. And in your case, in particular, for example, with an MSP, they're often not the right people. So, for example, when someone wants to, think of getting an MSP. They say, "Oh, we get the CIO involved, or we'll get these people." They get the people who they think are the specialists. They probably don't get the sales director or anyone like that, but the sales director is a major stakeholder in the decision, right? He's also a very influential person in the business. And here's the thing about value: the value is greater the further downstream it's impacted. To give you an example, if you impact the sales director, the value to them is far greater than just the value of what you provide as an MSP. This is a concept of value in service versus value at risk. Let me use an analogy. Look, for the want of a nail, a kingdom was lost. If you just focus on the nail, which could be your MSP service, then, $1.50 nail is very expensive compared to $1 nail. But when you say, well, yes, but that holds the shoe on the horse, which means I can ride off to the kingdom and I'm going to save the kingdom, then who gives a stuff how much the nail costs? And so that's the problem with conversations you have, that they often center around price rather than value. If you're focusing on the outcomes, then that becomes less important. And they say, but so-and-so is 20% cheaper than Lucas. I say, yeah, but we get this value from Lucas, which is a much bigger delta than the difference in price. And that is the science or art of selling, if you like. And the way that works is by understanding the director's why, or the decision maker's why. That from his mind, it helps me increase sales. It keeps my sales force happier, helps them become more productive. That's worth a shed load.
Because I know that
makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. Because I know if in their mind anyway, they're working it out on the spot. If that happens, it triggers this, it does this, it gives me profit, it makes everyone happier. Like it's they think about it, but then if they really wanted to know the metrics, they would dive into it afterwards anyway. Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I love it. Now, this conversation obviously could go on for hours. I don't want to steal too much of your time, but I'm curious. So, at your point in your life, without diving into that topic of conversation, what drives you now? Like, why are you doing what you're doing?
I'm really interested in lifting the professionalism of sales. It really frustrates me, the perception of sales. It's almost perceived by some as a career of last resort. If all else fails, and that attracts all the wrong types of people into it. And there's also the concern that this sense that, you need to be this extroverted, gift of the gab type person, which is absolutely what you don't want to have in sales, right? In fact, the science is that introverts make fantastic salespeople, right? Curious, interested people who are interested in you. So I'm really interested in lifting lifting the standing of the profession. I'm proud to be a salesperson. I've always called myself a salesperson. I've never used all these other euphemisms like account manager, business development manager, anything but sales. I mean, it is what it is, right? So we need to
even though there's a negative connotation around the word sales, and they're not changing it from sales to something else completely.
Yeah. Well, Daniel Pink, you may know, wrote the book Drive about motivation, wrote another book, To Sell is Human. He commissioned research for the book, 6,000 people he surveyed. The average worker spends 40% of their working life selling, whether they're in sales or not. I mean, if you're wanting someone to collaborate with you or to assist you or whatever, you're selling, or you're wanting a better role in the company, you're selling. It's a life skill. You're trying to attract a life partner. That's selling. I mean, influencing. So I guess I have this view that selling is a life skill. The capacity to influence is a life skill. It's worth developing.
And so now you're at the point that you want to give back and you want to help out. And I'm not going to put you on the spot here because obviously we've literally just met. But if people wanted to find out more about you, what you're doing, how you can give back to the community, and I guess remove this negative mindset, I'll call it, from the sales process or sales world. But also I know for a fact that every single company that I've been dealing with don't even know where to start to even go, well, how do I hire my first salesperson? How do I build a sales team? How do I make sure? Because I'll put it this way. Literally every conversation I've had the last 3 weeks, they've like, I know someone who's hired salespeople and it's epically failed for them, so I don't know if I want to do it. And so there's already this doubt in the mind of going, well, why do I want to hire a salesperson if I know that this other company went and blew a couple $100,000 on hiring people that never got any results? Yeah, so that's a different shift of mindset first to get yourself out of that. Well, it's failed for them, so it'll fail for me, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, back to that could be a whole different topic. But back to this conversation around if people want to find out, more about you, what's the best way to make this happen? And I'll throw it.
Well,
up
they can email me at patrick@thesalesnatural, all one word.com. Or they can visit my website, The Sales Natural. There's a lot of resources there. All of my material I provide for free. Okay, so I'm not anal about my intellectual property in terms of keeping it under wraps. I'm very happy to share it, provide it, discuss. I'm keen on. And then sometime along the way, some people hire me for my services, but that's. Some people decide to do that because they want more intense or more hands-on stuff. But at the end of the day, everything I've got is available for nothing, and I'm really happy to. I want to elevate the profession. I'd like to encourage, and I'm starting to work on a few sort of initiatives at the moment, which are a little bit different in terms of attracting people into the profession. It
sounds like it makes sales sexy again.
Well, yeah. I mean, where do you go to learn about it?
Yeah.
How do you do a sales? How do you do a sales trade?
I assume that doesn't exist at university or school. Or
no, not really. Not really. And as I said, I was very fortunate because I had mentors in my early days, and I don't, in my experience, getting around a lot of companies, I don't see a lot of those. And that's really the void is in sales management. The lack of experience in sales management means that we're not breeding salespeople. We don't have the coaches to bring salespeople through. And so we then promote those salespeople into sales manager roles. And just by the way, the science has been done on this. Salespeople are not the best sales managers, which is part of the problem. So
I'll put my hand up, and I know I've literally lived that firsthand the last couple of years where I've loved doing sales and I love meeting people. And then I started digging into the metrics and working out from a sales manager perspective. And I was like, I hate this. This sucks. I don't want to do metrics. I don't want to do all these reporting. Like, I just want to get out there and sell, right? Yeah. So I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah. But sales manager's principal role is as a coach. Well, like any leader, any manager, your number one role is coaching. Everything else is administration, but it's essentially leadership is what it's about, right?
Yeah, well, there's I don't know if you want to work with more tech startups, but there's a really cool avenue where we're based out of River City Labs in the precinct, and there must be, I'm going to say 50-ish mentors which volunteer their time once a week or once a fortnight, once a month, whenever it might be. You can get an opportunity to to work with other tech startups like us in the ecosystem to give back to the community. And the flip side is if that company wants to work with you more than that, what you're offering for free, then they can hire you directly.
Yeah, I mean, I could potentially. A day was when I was myself in an incubator organization called iLab, and I actually ran some training programs in that, so I'm fairly familiar, I guess, with the space. But yeah, that's a good suggestion. Yeah, happy to help.
You're not putting on the spot. It's just an option for you. Cool. Anyway, this has been great. How would you like to wrap this up? Obviously, I've been a bit selfish and I've understood more what's happening with me. I can hear your phone going off in the background, so you probably need to get.
Sorry, did you? I just moved it.
Get back on. Get back on the world of living. But to finish it off, is there any last comments or quotes you'd like to finish off with? Yeah, we were adding value to everyone's life, not just mine.
Yeah, but I think in terms of selling, I talk about having natural conversations. Engage with buyers the same way you would engage with a friend. All right. Salespeople walk in with an agenda, a list of questions, and that ends up like an interrogation for the buyer. I mean, you don't sit down with your friend and go through a checklist and say, how's your mum and how's so-and-so? How the conversation goes organically. And if you do that and really pay attention, you don't need a list of questions. So as a MSP, if you just go in and say, when this MSP service that you're looking for works the way you want it to, what's that going to look like? And they're going to say, what do you mean? Well, I'm saying, well, what's the outcome? What's your desired state? What? And they're going to say, well, my internet's going to stay up, and then you can ask questions. Okay, and what happens if it goes down? And then you start getting a sense of their perceptions of value. Well, this happens or that happens. Just be curious, just have a natural conversation. And the interesting thing is, you just by virtue of the questions you ask and your level of interest, they automatically assume that you must be able to fix the problem. That's the interesting thing, right? You don't have to join all the dots. They're smart enough to know this guy seems to know what he's talking about. These seem to be sensible questions he's asking, encouraging me to think about. I think I'll be happy just heading down the street. What do you think I need, Lucas? Oh, well, let's just work. And that's just how it goes about. Just how you would with a friend.
That's happened a million times with me. And they go, oh, so you know how to build websites? Yeah, absolutely. I know how to build websites.
Yes.
Tech, aren't you? Yeah, I'm in tech. Oh, so you know how to do digital marketing? Yeah, absolutely. I know how to do digital
marketing. No. That's you got to pull yourself back. You got to pull yourself back from the brink.
Yeah.
A really good analogy, metaphor is a doctor. If you meet a doctor, you don't know if they're going to be able to fix you or not. How do you assess them?
You do. Come on, they're a doctor. Of course,
that's right. You assess them on their diagnostics, don't you? If they ask, and so Lucas, if you put your hand like that, does it hurt just under there? And they go, yeah. And then does that happen? Yeah. You think, oh my God, this person really understands me, and you'll trust him.
Yeah.
But if you walked in and they said, look, what you need is this and this and this, which is what salespeople do, you'd say, how would you know? So the interesting thing is salespeople, sort of prescribe without diagnosing. I mean, in the medical profession, that would be malpractice. You can go to jail for that. But salespeople do it all the time. So yeah, be curious.
I'm curious on that point then, and it's very curious around what does sales look like in the next, 20, 50, 100 years. We know that typically, when I say we, the population of salespeople know that the product or service that they're selling will solve the problem that they have in their business within 30 seconds. Why is it you have to go through stages and stages and layers of building trust and everything else to get to the outcome that you know that you can get to in 30 seconds? Will that ever change?
Very good question. One of the first pieces of advice I got from an early mentor was, if you're going to be different, first be the same, then be different. Right? What that means is you need to be relatable. Otherwise, you're just different. So they have their own terms of reference. You can't go from where you're at to over here and people take that leap. First, you have to be relatable in their world. And then in your case, take them on this journey to understand what it is that you're proposing. You can join the dots in, 5 minutes, 30 seconds or whatever you say, because that is your paradigm. They can't. And that's really the trick. The trick is to be relatable.
Yeah.
And that is why the curiosity comes in, because that automatically makes you relatable. The other part of curiosity, by the way, is hang on every word. Just listen, don't listen for. The big problem with salespeople is they listen for. They're listening for cues to sell things. They're listening for cues to dive in. And when you do that, you can't listen. You can't listen and think at the same time, right? We only do one thing at a time as humans. So just listen for. And what will happen is, the next question will automatically occur. They'll give you a cue. So say, oh, this and this is happening. So, oh yeah, what does that mean? Well, this and this. Well, how do you feel about that? Just like you do with a friend. And you'll get there.
Like you should do with a friend.
Yeah, that's right.
You have a problem? I'm a male. I'm logic. I know how to solve that problem.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. That's why I guess females, not to be sexist, but females are in a sense predisposed, better disposed to be sellers than
no sexist whatsoever, because they're just way better at it than what we are.
Well, they're more empathetic.
Yeah.
So, and that's really important. You want to get empathy. So again, salespeople typically ask questions like, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? When they should be asking more of, what do you feel about that? So when you ask a buyer or prospect, well, what do you think about this? And then they tell you, and they say, how does that affect you? Oh, okay. How do you feel about that? Well, it really ticks me off, and that's how you get to understand what they value, is what's important to them. We don't intuitively think to ask those questions. So
This has been an absolute pleasure, delight, and this has been epic, Patrick. I really, really appreciate your time. I know how busy you are in life these days, so thank you very much for giving back to the community. I know people watching this will get a lot of value out of this, and I just hope that they can take a couple of key points that you've said throughout this conversation and not just listen to it, but actually implement it in their business immediately. So thank you very much.
You're welcome, Lucas, and I appreciated your curiosity. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I hope there has been of value.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure has. All right, till next time. Cheers.
All righty. Cheers.